aster, burdock, cardoon, artichoke, calendula, chamomile, chicory, coneflower, chrysanthemum, cosmos, dahlias, dandelions, endive, goldenrod, cornflower, lettuce, marigold, ragweed, safflower, salsify, stevia, sunflower, tansy, tarragon, tickseed, wormwood, yarrow, and zinnias. This week on the Growing Space podcast, we are continuing with our mini-series all about the different plant families, getting ready for the spring growing season. And this week, we are going to talk all about the Asteraceae family, also known as the Compositae plant family, or the composites, or just simply the daisy family. And I am so thankful that you have tuned in to today's episode, and this is such a delightful little plant family. Obviously, many of the plants that I just listed out are edible, some are more ornamental, some are medicinal. And we are going to talk through all the different characteristics of the Asteraceae family today. We're going to talk about why they're such great plants for our growing spaces. We're going to talk about how to plant them, what kind of sunlight they need, whether to use a seed or seedling to plant them, recommendations for small space growing, and then also just talk about some of the other cool things about the Asteraceae plant family. I love this plant family. It's so cheerful. Some of my favorite plants are members of this plant family, and I am just so excited to share them with you today. Welcome to the Growing Space podcast. I'm your host, Farmer Erin, owner of The Patio Farmer, and I believe that no matter what size space you have, you can grow food at home. Tune in every Tuesday as I share my best tips, tricks, and encouragement for tending to homegrown edible plants. I'm here to support your food growing journey. The Growing Space podcast is sponsored by Plant Club by The Patio Farmer. Plant Club by The Patio Farmer is a monthly subscription service I started in 2020. It's a membership-based opportunity to take your growing journey to the next level. With 4 different membership options, you get to decide the amount and kind of support that's right for you. All Plant Club members receive access to my online community through a platform called Circle. Having access to this platform allows members to share pictures, ask questions, celebrate harvests, and get to know each other. All Plant Club members also have access to free seeds each month, along with information on how to plant and tend to their crops, with seeding instructions and downloadable resources from the Patio Farmers Resource Library. Membership starts at just $14 a month. Join Plant Club today by visiting my website, thepatiofarmer.com/membership. The Asteraceae plant family is one of the largest plant families. Get ready for this. There are over 23,600 species of the Asteraceae family. It's also one of the largest plant families of angiosperms. Angiosperms represent about 80% of all green plants. And what an angiosperm is, we're starting off really technical here, but what an angiosperm is a plant whose seed develops inside an ovule or a little ovary. The flower is what contains the ovule of the angiosperm, and the flower is what we're going to spend the most time talking about in today's episode, because of course, with this being the aster family and the daisy family, the flowers are really what this plant family is known for most. One of the best ways to identify members of the Asteraceae family is through their flowers. So they have really unique flower compositions where their flowers are actually composite flowers, which is why, sometimes members of this plant family go by the name Compositae versus Asteraceae. It's because of how their flowers are structured. What we would see as a petal that makes up the whole flower is actually its own little mini flower. At the top of the episode today, I gave just a quick list of tons of members of the Asteraceae plant family. Now, most of those on the list are not edible members of the plant family, but they are like super common plants that we see in growing spaces. There's a lot of cut flowers that are represented in that list, like dahlias and zinnias and cornflower and coneflower. Oh, my favorite flower, the sunflower, is a member of the Asteraceae plant family. But there's so many flowers that are members of this plant family. I wanted to list them all at the top of this episode because I feel like it's important to be able to draw those connections. As we're learning throughout this whole mini series about meeting the plant families, there's just so much benefit that comes from understanding like which plants are cousins and which plants are related, and all of those different connections just help us understand the plants that we are growing and cultivating in our growing spaces so much better. But today I want to focus on 4 of those edible plants that are members of the Asteraceae family. So we're going to talk about the artichoke and cardoon first, and then we're going to talk about lettuce, and we're going to talk about marigolds. And yes, marigolds are edible. Fun. So fun. Okay, so we're going to talk about artichokes, cardoons, lettuce, and marigolds in today's episode, why they are so wonderful for our growing spaces, what you can do with them, how you can grow them, and much, much more. Okay, so jumping right in and talking about the cardoons and the artichokes. I bet you didn't know that an artichoke is actually an edible flower. Oh, yeah. And artichokes and cardoons are super closely related. They look very similar as they grow. They kind of resemble another cousin within this plant family, the thistle. So if you think of how a thistle grows, it's kind of spiky. It's kind of like a soft, like sage green color. Lots of big spikes and needles though, right? And if you've ever seen a thistle flower, you know, maybe if you have Scottish heritage, you know, of the Scottish thistle, but they bloom a beautiful, it's almost neon purple, bright purple flower. It's stunning. And artichoke and cardoon also bloom this bright neon purple flower. The artichoke head, or the part of the artichoke that contains the artichoke heart, which is what we're most commonly used to eating, that is the flower. It can be kind of difficult. You know, if you're cultivating artichoke, you're going to be plagued with like, oh, I'm growing you to eat you, but I also want to see your flower. Luckily, artichoke plants produce multiple flowering heads per plant. So you can harvest some of those and eat the artichoke hearts, and you can leave some to bloom. I would definitely recommend leaving at least one to bloom because it's just so stunning. The edible part of the cardoon is actually not the flower head. It is the stalk. It's a nice complement to have artichokes and cardoons growing in your growing space because you get to eat different parts of those plants. They are both perennial, so they do take up a good amount of space. You want to make sure that wherever you put them, you give them about 2 to 3 feet per plant. They also need at least 6 hours of direct sunlight. The more sunlight you give them, the happier they will be, but they need at least 6 hours of direct sunlight. And my favorite places to grow cardoon and artichoke are in landscaping beds. Yes, I like using these 2 plants, and actually a lot of members of the plant family, but these 2 edible members in particular, as edible landscaping plants. They are so stunning and they make such a great, easy swap for like a traditional shrub or some kind of like medium-sized perennial plant. They add a lot of dimension. They're really unique. Like, who has cardoon and artichoke growing in their front flower beds? Probably not many people. The front of our house already had a bunch of plants planted, But the back of our house was kind of like a blank slate when we moved in. And so I just planted a whole bunch of cardoon in my in-ground flower bed. And they bring me so much joy. Like they bloom right under the window to our bedroom. And so every morning, like in midsummer, I can look out and I can just see these bright purple blooms. It's really wonderful. And the bees and butterflies love them, love the blooms. I always see honeybees like kind of tucked in, exploring the little flowers. It's so exciting. So yeah, if you have never considered practicing edible landscaping before, then this is your invitation to find some cardoon and artichoke and maybe pop a couple in instead of adding a shrub or a bush or what have you. Any member of the Asteraceae plant family would be a great addition to a landscaped space. So if you wanted to do like some dwarf coneflower or some zinnias or dahlias in a landscaping space, that would be beautiful. Calendula is great. It's a great medicinal plant. Yarrow is also medicinal and great for growing spaces. Tansy as well, salsify. All of these plants are great. Chamomile as well. Oh my gosh, I could just keep going. But all of these are great to plant in and amongst our vegetables for strengthening the pollinator populations. So cardoon and artichoke also do great when you plant them in pots or containers or smaller spaces. If you're not ready to commit to growing them directly in the ground, that's fine. You can put them in a large pot or you can put them in a raised bed. They will do great there. They're also fairly easy to start from seed. So you don't have to have a transplant or a little baby plant to start artichoke or cardoon. You can use seed. Let's talk about lettuce. Lettuce, it's a fantastic crop to grow at home. And in particular, if you have a small space that you're working with. Now, it's great to grow lettuce at home because you can save so much money. I mean, one packet of lettuce seed might cost you $4 and it will grow so much lettuce for you. You could probably fill those silly little clamshells that you buy lettuce in at the grocery store like 5 times just with your first harvest. Lettuce is such a great small space grower. And depending on the type of lettuce that you're growing, there's 2 main types of lettuce that you can grow. You can either grow a head lettuce or you can grow a leaf lettuce. Head lettuce is going to be like a romaine or an iceberg or butter lettuce. Typically, these plants grow one compact head of lettuce. And then there's also leaf lettuce. So leaf lettuce is typically what like your salad mixes are going to be, your mesclun mix. Those are generally more leaf lettuce varieties. And those are great for small spaces because those are cut and come again varieties. So you can cut down all of the lettuce, leaving like 2 to 3 inches of the plant above the soil, and that will regrow. And then you can just keep harvesting from the same patch over and over again. When you plant leaf lettuce, you can plant it like 1 seed every inch or 2, and it will just give you this like continual harvest of lettuce throughout the season, which is great. Lettuce, of course, is an annual plant, so it only grows for a short period of time. Spring's around the corner, and spring is a great time to plant lettuce. Lettuce also needs about 6 hours of direct sunlight every day, and I definitely prefer to direct sow my lettuce. So I use seeds versus buying a seedling, and the reason for that is because lettuce grows so fast. When we were talking about brassicas 2 weeks ago, we were talking about radishes and how fast they grow. Lettuce is right up there. Like you plant lettuce and it sprouts within a week, and then 3 to 4 weeks later, you're harvesting it. So because it grows so quickly, generally when you go to transplant something, you want to be able to give it like 2 or 3 weeks before you harvest it, So it gives it time, it gives its little root systems time to get comfy and settle in and really get a grasp of its new environment before you go in and significantly prune or harvest from it. I find as soon as I buy a lettuce seedling, it matures so quickly that by the time I get it transplanted, or if it happened to be sitting in the nursery or plant store for a week, it could already be of harvest size is what I'm getting at here. If you harvest it that soon after you transplant it, it doesn't regrow as effectively as if you had just sown the seed in that place and waited a couple weeks for it to get mature. And then when you harvest it, it doesn't experience as much shock. But like I always say, find what's going to work for you, find what's going to work for your space. If you prefer using lettuce seedlings, don't let me stand in your way. Now, if you are really interested in learning more about growing lettuce, if you want to learn the differences between head lettuce and leaf lettuce, how it grows, how you harvest it, how you plant it, how you tend to it, then consider joining Plant Club. The month of March, we are focused on lettuce. We're going to do a deep dive in the weekly newsletter that goes out just to Plant Club members at the no, grow, or wow levels. We are going to be learning all the ins and outs of direct seeding, head lettuce, and leaf lettuce. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh man, I am ready to grow some delicious, crisp, fresh lettuce at home this year. This is one of my goals. Oh, the patio farmer is here to help me achieve my goals. Yes, I am. Consider joining Plant Club. You can join at the no level, no matter where in the world you live. The grow level and the whoa level for now are just for people who live in the greater Charlotte area, which is where I'm based. I am based in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is the USDA Ag Zone 8A. The other member of the Asteraceae plant family that I wanted to talk about today in particular is marigolds. As I have mentioned already in this episode, there are so many members of the Asteraceae plant family that are great companion plants. For those of you who are new to the term companion planting, this is the practice of growing something that is serving a specific purpose in your growing space, other than, of course, the fact that you want to eat it, because aren't all the plants serving a purpose in our growing space if we're eating them? Yes. But companion planting is usually when you are planting something to either deter something from visiting your space. So if you're trying to keep pests out of your space, you can practice companion planting. If you are trying to attract pollinators, that is a form of companion planting when you're planting a specific crop or a specific plant or flower because you want it to bring in pollinators to your space, or you are looking to improve your soil chemistry by planting things that grow well together or, anecdotally benefit one another in the soil that they're growing. So those are the three main reasons why you would practice companion planting, and marigolds are a fantastic companion plant. They accomplish two of those companion planting goals. First, because they're a flower, because they're a member of the Asteraceae family, they're going to bring in pollinators to your space, which is fantastic. We need to do all that we can to support our pollinators, especially as home food growers, because there's just so much working against them. So planting wonderful flowers for them to come visit will bring them to your space. And it's great to have pollinators in your space as well, because a lot of our plants that we eat, like tomatoes and cucumbers and squash and other fruiting plants in the summertime, need pollination in order for us to be able to eat those tasty fruits. So the more pollinators you have in your space, the more pollination you are welcoming in, and the more productive your plants are going to be for you. So marigolds, just in being flowers, are going to bring in pollinators, but marigolds also have this really fragrant smell. And if you know what I'm talking about, then you totally get it. And if you are like, well, what does a marigold smell like? This summer, when they're all in bloom, just go take a whiff. Or like pick one and rub the flower in between your fingers and get that strong whiff of marigold. Just because of that strong scent and those oils that are in that flower, they do a fantastic job of keeping away larger pests from your space, primarily deer, bunnies, and squirrels. They don't like all that pungent smell of marigolds, and they'll leave them alone. They could literally eat all of your other flowers and plants, but they're not going to touch the marigolds because they don't like how they smell. So use that to your advantage and plant marigolds in and around things that deer and bunnies and squirrels tend to like your cherry tomatoes, for example. You don't want to share those with a squirrel. Squirrels, they're so cheeky. They pick one cherry tomato off, take one little bite of it, and then just throw it on the ground for you to find. Plant some marigolds and they will definitely reconsider. Marigolds are also an edible flower, so you can eat their petals. They're going to taste similar to how they smell. I actually really enjoy the smell of marigolds. And I had one client a couple years ago tell me about this recipe that she found for a marigold margarita. You make a simple syrup using the petals, and then you can make cocktails with it. She said that they made it for Cinco de Mayo and it was delicious. So there you go. Maybe it's time to make a marigold margarita. I don't know. Why not? But marigolds are also great for using in pastry decoration. If you're a baker, you want to make a nice little summery cake to take to a party, you can throw some bright, beautiful marigold petals on top for a little touch of color. Marigold seeds are also one of my favorites to save. And let's just talk about seed saving for a second, because the Compositae family, the Asteraceae family, this little daisy family that we're talking about this week are some of the easiest plants to save seeds from, hands down. It is super easy to let your marigold seed heads dry out towards the fall, towards the end of summer. Once they're done blooming, just leave them on their plant, let them dry out a little bit. And then when they're dry, you can come and deadhead the marigolds. And if you just take your fingers and rub that little flower head at the base, all of a sudden you're going to see a ton of marigold seed. I mean, a ton. You literally need 5 marigold seed heads for the rest of your life. There's so much seed tucked in there. Now, the same thing goes with lettuce. If you were to not harvest your lettuce and you let it go to seed, that's when it gets tall, super tall and kind of a inverted cone. Then it will produce a flower, which, this is when it comes in handy to know which plants are related, because dandelions are also members of the Asteraceae plant family. And when lettuce goes to seed, you see that family resemblance, when you get the big fluffy white dandelion and you close your eyes and you make a wish and you go to blow it and all the little seeds fly away. The little seed is attached to that white parasol looking thing. And that's what lettuce seed looks like too. Yeah. So you can harvest those little seed heads, just like marigolds. You harvest little seed head on lettuce and you rub it in between your fingers. And then all of a sudden you see all of these little lettuce seeds. And at the very tippy top of the lettuce seed is that little white parasol. Yeah, so super easy to save lettuce seed as well. Kind of an interesting thing that I experienced last summer is I saved some of my cardoon seeds. So kind of full circle back to cardoons and artichokes. But it was fascinating to me, knowing that they're cousins to lettuce and dandelion. As I was harvesting these seeds, they do the same thing. They also have that cute little white parasol, which is helpful in traveling or dissemination, right? These members of the Asteraceae plant family, they reseed themselves in the wind. They go to seed, they have these big, beautiful seed heads with these parasols that catch the wind, right? And that's how the seed transfers and finds a fertile little spot of soil to regrow into a brand new plant. We covered some of my favorite topics in today's episode, and I am so glad that you tuned in today. I hope that you will consider planting some Asteraceae or members of the Compositae, daisy aster family in your growing space. I will put a link to a list of all of those that I mentioned today. And that link where each crop or each plant is named, it has another link that you can click off and learn even more about that particular vegetable or herb or plant in general. And there are so many wonderful medicinal plants in this plant family as well. I feel like I just need to touch on that really briefly. I mean, calendula and chamomile and coneflower, which is also known as echinacea. Yarrow is another fantastic medicinal. And then just some other great herbs to have in your space, like endive and stevia and tarragon. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many reasons why you should plant members of this plant family. If you've listened to episodes of the Growing Space podcast already, then you will know that at the end of every episode, I like to share a fun fact or a little tip, a little morsel of information to take with you as we close out. And today, I just wanted to share a reminder or maybe a suggestion for a new habit to get into. Earlier this month, I wrote a whole newsletter about 4 different habits to take with you into the new year to strengthen your food growing journey and practice. And the first one was looking at the 10-day forecast, which I just want to reiterate here is such a great habit to get into as plant parents and as you're tending to your edible growing spaces. You want to have your finger on the pulse for what's coming your way in terms of weather. So I usually look at the 10-day forecast at least 2 or 3 times a week. I know it sounds a little excessive, but it's true. I do. You certainly don't have to look at it that often, but I would definitely recommend once a week, maybe twice a week, depending on the time of year. It can help you identify when you need to water, when you can skip watering based on the precipitation. This time of year, I find it's really helpful to check the 10-day forecast, especially for frosts and freezes and cold snaps. So look at the 10-day forecast at least once a week. It's really helpful. So this year I wrote an entire planning calendar called Growth. It's filled with 52 weeks of intentions, reminders, and advice for growing food at home in 2024. I will put a link to this in the show notes. And if you are interested in grabbing my calendar, it's just $35. And it's a digital resource where you'll be able to receive a weekly intention, a weekly reminder, or piece of advice from me throughout all of 2024. Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the Growing Space podcast. I hope that you learned something new and that you were able to take this new information home with you and implement into your growing journey and into your growing space. As always, I am here to support you and your food growing journey. If you'd like to learn more about the different services and resources and membership programs that I run through The Patio Farmer, please check out my website, thepatiofarmer.com. You can also follow me on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and oh my gosh, most recently, TikTok. Wow. I know. Here I am. Patio Farmer is on TikTok. It's very exciting. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like or a rating or a review if you want. Maybe share a little comment about your favorite part of the episode. Share it with a friend. The more interactions I get with my little podcast online, the more I'm able to help people just like you in their food growing journeys. As always, thanks for being here, and I will see you again next week.